Hey, it's Jennifer. Thanks for joining me today on Delaware County's Hidden History. I was talking with a friend a few days ago about the podcast and was explaining to them how it's just little tidbits of this topic and that topic, none of which are really big enough to write an article about or anything. Just little teeny tiny pieces here and there. And in the discussion, somebody, and I don't even remember which one of us it was, used the term micro. And it really seems to fit that what I am doing is kind of sharing micro history. So that's our new term that we've coined. I don't know, maybe someone else coined it first, but we're going to claim it now. Sometimes history doesn't mean notorious, famous, or even infamous. Everything has a story. Every place, person, thing. And today's topic is about a building that nearly every person in Muncie or in Delaware County has seen at least once, if not 1,000 times. If you've ever waited in the drive-up window line at McDonald's on South Madison Street, you've probably seen the 3-story brick building across the street from the drive-through speakers. Even as simple and utilitarian as this building is, it still has a story. And we're going to talk today about the Virginia Apartments. In 1901, Samuel Ringold, formerly Samuel Ringoldski, purchased the vacant land on South Monroe Street from the heirs of Adam Wolf for $2,500, about $95,000 in 2025 dollars. It included both the site of the future apartment building and the home the Ringolds built at the corner of Monroe and Charles Streets. The house is still standing there. In 1905, Sam, the owner of the Great Little Store clothing shop, and his wife Rosalind, the former Rosalind Netzorg, built a 7-unit structure on the site and named it Ringold Flats. It featured a 3-story porch on both the front and the back. Each of the floors was divided down the center with a hallway accessing 5-room apartments on each side. The 7th apartment was a 4-room flat that provided for the live-in janitor in the basement. In 1915, Sam and Rosalind sold the building to Homer and Anna Studi. In 1920, Edward and Clara Barrett acquired the property. By the mid-1920s, the name had been changed to the Virginia Apartments, probably in recognition of the Barrett's daughter, Mary Virginia. The name Virginia Apartments, Ringold Flats, and Ringold Apartments kind of interchanged a lot in the 1920s, sometimes even having the same ad run within a couple of weeks of each other for the same apartment, but under each different name. At about 1 p.m. on November 15, 1940, a fire broke out in the building. At that point, it was still owned by E.W. Barrett. Muncie Fire Chief Archie McCabe said that it started in the basement, in an area described as a steel locker. Now, that part of the building was used by the janitor. It was his living quarters, as well as the boiler room and apparently some storage areas. As the fire spread rapidly through the building, the quarters of D.E. Doherty on the north side and James Hildebrand on the south side of the first floor were consumed by the blaze quickly. On the second floor, the rooms of Max Miller on the north side and Mrs. W.P. Stevens on the south suffered smoke and heat damage, but didn't actually burn, it seems. Mrs. Stevens, described as an aged woman who had been ill, was carried to a ladder and assisted down by firefighters. The occupants of the smoky third floor, Virginia Ailes and her daughter Mary Ann to the north and Lou Campbell to the south, had all gathered up on the front porch of the third floor, waiting to be rescued by the firefighters. Mrs. Stevens set out most of the extinguishing at the neighbor's house, but before the firefighters were back to their station, she was already back in her third-floor rooms. Mr. Doherty's apartment suffered the most damage, particularly the kitchen and the bedroom areas, and damage to the building was estimated at about $10,000. There were no injuries reported, but by the end of the month, Barrett had already been filing for permits to make the needed repairs. And by January 1st of 1941, the fixtures, bathtubs, sinks, etc., that were removed as part of the overhaul were offered for sale, and on Sunday, March 28th, the doors of the newly repaired apartment building, boasting new plumbing, new cabinets, new linoleum, and a host of other bright and shiny amenities, were swung open for all the world to see. The Barretts sold their Burlington Road home in August of 41 and moved into apartment 4 post-fire. possibly due to Mrs. Barrett's failing health. She died there in 1942. Edward moved to the west end of town and the property was put up for sale in 1945. It didn't sell by the time of Edward's death in 1950. He had only 2 children surviving at that point, and son Forrest transferred his share of the property to sister Mary Virginia Thornburg shortly after the death of their father. Residents throughout the years regularly graced the social column in the local newspapers. Lunches, dinners, receptions, meetings of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Missions Circle of the Unitarian Universalist Church, the 7-Eleven Club, the Phoenix Club, St. Martha's Guild of Grace Episcopal Church, the Federated Club of Clubs, along with a variety of card players meeting for euchre, whist, and bridge. So it's really a popular location. As you can see, it would have been covered a lot in the social pages. Over the years, the property has changed hands many times, and in its later years, it was divided into as many as 13 units. While it's no longer the social hotspot that it once was, it still stands in testament to the endurance of spirit and construction of days past. So the next time you're in line at McDonald's on South Madison, having a Big Mac attack, as they say, don't forget to look over to your right and give a nod to the Virginia Apartments, or the Ringold Flats as it was originally known, and its part in the history of our community. I appreciate you joining me today for this episode of Delaware County's Hidden History, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.